Don Jr.'s statements on a podcast, which we played, where he's talking about, and I think you put this on your Twitter account as well, where he's talking about how he had a conversation with his dad about picking individual journalists and not having certain journalists in the room. And I just see that as code for saying, we don't want to be challenged. We don't want people in there that are going to challenge us with challenging questions. We just want people to cater to us. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, obviously it's the White House Correspondents Association that decides who gets to go in the room. And this was a little bit of a bone of contention in the last time he was president, because he wanted OAN in there. Chanel Rion, he wanted Emerald Robinson up front. You know, he wanted people that were friendly to him in the room. And the White House Correspondents Association felt like some of these people weren't qualified or shouldn't be in there. So this has been a thing in the past, but you know, he is clearly focused on targeting the press here. He's talked about it repeatedly. He's floated pulling broadcast licenses. He's floated DOJ investigations of media companies. He's talked about, you know, the hallmark of the last Trump administration and this campaign has been leakers, people close to him leaking information to the press. And he has called for journalists to be jailed who refuse to disclose their sources. In fact, he called for the journalists who reported the when the Dobbs brief was leaked. He wanted them put in jail until they revealed their sources. And this is just, again, it's just more part of the pressure campaign on media. And it's what Trump refers to as working the refs. You know, he often cites Bobby Knight as his role model for learning this lesson, that he is working the refs. He's threatening, he's prodding, he's cajoling the media because he wants better coverage. That's what it comes down to. That's why he's doing all of this.
I think it's dangerous, Ron, and I know you agree with me on that. And I was just playing some clips in my head of some of the people that we could see in the White House press briefing room. Could we see a Laura Loomer? Could we see a Dinesh D'Souza type person? I mean, OAN, you're right. I mean, I just think they're a disgrace of an organization. I don't have a lot of respect for a lot of so-called journalists. And, you know, this is my problem, Ron. When people on social media call themselves independent journalists, number one, they don't have any degrees. They don't get both sides of a story. They call it an expose, right? They want to attack somebody, like they want to be a Laura Loomer type person, and they want to just come out with lies and propaganda, and then they call that journalism, yet they call CNN fake news. I just think it's repulsive.
Yeah, I think that there has to be this like middle ground between what we heard on Morning Joe 2 days ago about him basically, you know, taking the line of attack with the Axios guy of basically saying like the legacy media is the media and everybody else is not legitimate journalism.
Right.
I think that that's too far, taking it too far, because what those legacy companies are feeling the impact of are small companies like ours and others that are out there that are entirely subscription based, reader supported, and that are breaking stories that they're not getting. So it's not that they're not valid and useful. And I agree. What we do like is not exactly the same as what they do, because we don't have the resources to send correspondents out all over the world and to cover things. But there also is that other extreme where just like everybody on social media is calling themselves a journalist and they're not. There are journalistic standards, and we, even though we're a small outfit, we try to abide by those standards. But I'll give you like one example. It's taught in journalism school that you always have to go and get the other side. So, so if you're going to trash like a Jason Miller, or you're going to trash somebody with the Trump campaign or some policy that he announced, what they teach is that you have to go to like the Trump campaign spokesperson and get their side, and you have to print that in your story. That's a difference between like us and mainstream legacy outlets, is we don't feel the need to do that.
Yeah, it's a great point. And every person that I talk about on this show, literally, I have reached out to. If I'm criticizing Don Jr., if I'm criticizing Donald Trump, I've had so many of their surrogates on. Even the cats and dogs story, I had a surrogate on when it came to so many statements that Donald Trump has made. I always reach out to a surrogate and give them the opportunity. And yeah, you're right. It just seems like a lot of these so-called journalists are unable to do that or refuse to do that. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Nancy Mace, because we've all been covering this story where she's tweeted over 200 times and she's so proud of herself because a transgender female colleague now can't use the restroom that she uses. I believe this woman, Ron, is mentally disturbed. I think there's something very wrong with her. And I also do notice every time when she's in one of her modes, as my phone is going off here, sorry about that. I was just noticing that when she talks in an interview and she discusses the fact that she was the victim of an assault, which is terrible, a rape, as she says, she immediately uses that as an excuse, which I find very bizarre in talking about women and women's restrooms. Why does she do that, Ron? I just find it very bizarre.
I've followed Mace very closely since she first ran for Congress in 2019, and because the reason why I follow her closely is she was in a swing district. It was basically like a 50-50 district, so I follow those races very closely. And first of all, about the sexual assault thing. Okay, the first time she ever brought up that she was sexually a victim of sexual assault was when she was running for Congress. Okay, so it was brought up in the context of like providing a defense for herself about something that was being argued against her during the campaign. So again, I tend to believe any woman who comes forward and says I was assaulted. It's my default that I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt on that. But I will say the circumstances surrounding her claim, which is political, and then how she has used it since, which is every time she does something obnoxious, she defaults to that as like, how dare you attack me because I was a victim of sexual assault 30 years ago.
Right.
And it's just sort of like, well, you're using that as your defense to every argument. Every time you do something horrific and horrifying and terrible, you default to you can't attack me because I'm a sex assault victim, when that may have absolutely nothing to do with the issue we're talking about.
That's such a good point.
Bathrooms, so
yeah.
But I think if you want to go into it a little more, if you have time, I don't know, but
yes.
I mean, you have to really sort of look at the history of Mace to understand Mace. So if you look at it, when she first ran in 2020, her district was like R+3, meaning like random Republican is supposed to win by 3 points. So it's a close district, right? And she ran as a moderate. She was not endorsed by Trump because she understood my district is a 50-50 district. And she ran on a lot of women's rights issues and tolerance for gay people and all that stuff. Then when January 6th happened, she was brand new, just been sworn in. She condemned Trump. She condemned January 6th, all of that. And then what happened is Trump got pissed, and Trump ran someone against her. Two things happened that caused Mace to become the person she is right now, the troll that she is right now. One is that Trump found someone, Nancy Arrington was her name, MAGA extreme far-right kook, to run against Mace in the primary and endorsed her and campaigned for her, did rallies for her against Mace. And Mace hit the panic button when that happened. And she ran up to New York City and filmed a video in front of Trump Tower where she said how much she loved Trump and how much she, believes in his agenda and supports him and all this kind of stuff. So it was just like Trump is campaigning against her. He called her a shameless liar in her own district at a rally. And yet Mace's response is, but I love you. I love Donald Trump. Please don't say these mean things about you. I love you so much, while he's calling her a shameless liar. So, and the reason for that is also the reason why she had to do that was because after the census in 2020, her district got redrawn and 40,000 black voters got moved out of the district. And so her district went from like R+3 to a Trumpy R+9.
Mm-hmm.
So she figured, okay, this is the way I got to go now. I got to be full MAGA. And basically she's been that ever since.
Very similar to a lot of the MAGA Republicans out there, whether it be a J.D. Vance or even a Marco Rubio. I wouldn't really call them MAGA. They know who Donald Trump is. How do we know that? Because of the things they've said in the past about Donald Trump. But the thing, and listen, I'm with you, Ron. When a woman or anybody, quite frankly, says they're the victim of a heinous crime, we tend to believe them because we're decent, normal human beings, of course, right? But I question Nancy Mace. Every interview she's done, literally in the last couple months, she brings up the fact that she was a victim of sexual assault. Okay, terrible. So why can't we ask you the question, then why are you supporting a liable sexual abuser? And I tell me if you agree with this or not. I make the analogy to this. Let's just say she knows who the man is that sexually abused her when she was 16. What if that man decided to run for office? And what if Democrats, women who claim that they were raped, decided to support this man? What would she say about people like that? Because that's exactly what she's doing with Donald Trump, right?
Well, I mean, Republicans said that a lot about Bill Clinton back in
Right.
1992 when he had allegations against him. They believed it. They thought he was unfit. He shouldn't run. He should be disqualified for office. And again, he denied all those things, and those things were shaky. The people involved were a little bit shaky making the accusations, and yet, Republicans piled on then. So yeah, she's definitely, there's something very wrong with her. I mean, I've documented so many things over the years before this that she did over the last few years. I mean, she showed up at a prayer breakfast one time. I mean, you think about it. This is in South Carolina. Her district is Charleston, South Carolina, on the coast. She shows up at like this evangelical Christian prayer breakfast and says, and she's the keynote speaker, and she gets up there and she says, "I'm so sorry I was late. My fiance wanted sex this morning and he wouldn't let me leave the house." I was like, what are you doing? This is a evangelical prayer breakfast, like with a bunch of old ladies.
I forgot about that, Ron. I forgot about
one thing after another that she's done. She wore like a scarlet A dress into Congress one day for attention, when not even realizing that the scarlet A stands for adulteress. She's just done so many stunts like this.
And again, somebody we're going to hear a lot more from because, she coddles to Donald Trump, I'm sure. Speaking of coddling to Donald Trump, let's talk about Matt Gaetz again for a moment. What do you make of the fact now that he's on Cameo? I mean, he's pulling a George Santos, Ron, isn't he?
Santos probably gave him the idea. They're buddies. So, and then I saw Boebert just went on there too.
Oh.
Boebert just went up for 250. Gaetz started at 250, but then he raised it to 500, and now it's 525. I've seen a couple of them. I mean, people like Jimmy Kimmel were able to fool Santos into like reading all these crazy scripts, and Santos threatened to sue Jimmy Kimmel over it. I don't think he ever did. He filed something, but I don't think he ever went through with it. And so what I said is it's going to be a little harder to get Gaetz than Santos to do something crazy, but maybe if you pay him enough money, he will. But I mean, he's sending out all the signals that he's running for governor of Florida in 2026. So,
I never say never.
His friends are trying to get him to run.
I never say never, Ron. I mean, look at who the president-elect is. I mean, I'm not going to say that Florida can't or he wouldn't have any chance. I mean, I don't think the chances would be good for him, but I don't put it past people in Florida to vote for this imbecile. I really don't. I don't know how you feel. You lived in Florida for a long time. I don't know how you feel.
Yeah, I think that I don't think he will. I think that somebody better will run against him and beat him. It's just the district that he's from, where he's from, is the Panhandle, up in Northwest Florida. It's very, very, very conservative. It's like R plus 30. So he was able to get away, sort of like a Marjorie Taylor Greene is in a similar type district, where they're just able to just bomb throw and say anything and do anything, and it doesn't matter. And so you get that like false sense of security where I can say anything and they'll still send me back. But the problem is, if you have ambitions to run out for something outside of your district, you're not going to win. So, and he has no connections in South Florida or Central Florida, which is where all the votes in Florida are. They're not up in the Panhandle.
So Ron, I did a little 10-minute segment on Sebastian Gorka yesterday. As you know, Donald Trump picking him to be a member of anti-terrorism unit. And Gorka, obviously, as you know, is a guy that's bigoted in nature. He's very odd, very strange. And he also, I've never seen anybody, Ron, look so weird carrying a gun and shooting a weapon. It's the weirdest stuff I've ever. I mean, we see a lot of these MAGA Republicans that want to act tough and they shoot their guns in campaign commercials. And I think they all look like morons. But I think at the top of that list is Sebastian Gorka. I've never seen a guy look so odd carrying a gun. What do you make of this pick? And moving forward, how do you think the relationship between Gorka and Trump will it last? I know that Gorka's a loyalist, right? And that's probably why Trump picked him. But what do you see this going?
People don't. Gorka has a podcast, and he's also on Newsmax, and he has a lot of viewers. And Trump, he's interviewed Trump like 20 times over the last 4 years. That to me, that's how he got this gig. Is the best way to get appointed to something is to get in front of Trump, get Trump's eyeballs on you. And either being on Fox to he's now at 30 people that he's appointed who at one point or another work for Fox. 30 between the last administration and this one. So that's the key to getting an appointment, is to get on TV or have a podcast or something.
Right.
And so Gorka, he washed out fairly quickly in the last administration, just like Bannon, because he didn't get along with anybody. Everybody hated him. I'm talking about the Trump people hated him. No one could stand Gorka. It was the same thing with Bannon. Everybody hated Bannon in the Trump White House. So but the thing is, like, if they brought him in for some low-level muckety-muck position, okay, and by the way, Gorka has like blocked and unblocked me like 20 times on Twitter. Every other month he blocks me and then he unblocks me. I don't know why he keeps unblocking me, but I think.
What did you do, Ron? What did you do? What did you do to
post a lot of like funny pictures and videos of him? I goof on him a lot, and he gets mad at me, and then he kind of wants to know what I'm up to, and then he comes back. So we have this like love-hate thing going, but he's put him in charge of counterterrorism. He is supposed to be the point man to stop terrorist attacks in the United States. So it's one thing to give him some low-level job, but he's giving him one of the most important jobs in the United States government, which I think is going to cause the Senate to take a long, hard look at this one.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, and I'm going to put Mike Huckabee in this conversation as well, ambassador to Israel, right? And Huckabee and Gorka are very anti-Palestine, and I think of all these people that were protesting against, they call him Genocide Joe. They're protesting in front of the DNC. We're not voting for you. We're voting for Trump. I'm wondering where all these people are at now, because Mike Huckabee is on the record saying that he doesn't believe the Palestinian people should exist, basically. I'm paraphrasing, but you remember the statements that he made. And by the way, Sebastian Gorka has made very similar statements about Palestinians as well. Where are all these people that were protesting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? Because none of these Democrats, from what I can tell, have ever made statements on the record like a Sebastian Gorka or a Mike Huckabee have made about Palestine and the Palestinian people.
And Gorka has trashed Tulsi Gabbard in the past, called her a kooky conspiracy theorist, and says she's in bed with Assad, and that's Trump's DNI nominee saying that about his counterterrorism, or counterterrorism saying about his DNI. It's crazy. The other odd thing about, and I'll get to the Israel thing in a second, but the other odd thing about Gorka is like 1,000% pro-Ukraine, like so pro-Ukraine, like completely out of step with everyone else in the party. He's basically like Lindsey Graham on Ukraine. And what he says is the best and fastest way to end the war in Ukraine is to give Ukraine even more aid than we're already giving him. So while the Trump administration is going to cut off all aid to Ukraine, Gorka is the exact opposite, which is a little odd because there's no one else in the Trump administration like him with that same view on Ukraine. But on Israel, I mean, Huckabee has some really strange views on Israel, and a lot of really far-right people base all of their thinking on Israel on basically two things. One is the Bible. I mean, so much of their views on the modern Middle East and Israel are biblically based, which is like 2,000-year-old history, and a little bit dangerous to get so caught up in basing your foreign policy on a book that was compiled by the Romans 2,000 years ago. So that's one thing. About and the other thing is it's largely racially based too. They view Israelis as white and surrounded by Arab Muslims, and Jesus was Jewish, so
Right.
so a lot of their views on like the modern Middle East are rooted in the Bible.
Yeah, no question. I wanted to ask you, Ron, before I let you go. I always love reading your articles. They're phenomenal on Midas Touch. What do you got working on now that you can share with the listeners?
Oh man, well, working on the daily. I'm working a lot on this tariff stuff.
Oh,
I'm really,
geez.
really paying attention to the
Yeah,
tariff stuff. The response of Canada and Mexico. I saw what the Mexican president gave a great statement today. What I hope is that Trudeau, who can be kind of weak, and the Mexican president, they've always been sort of little brother, little sister to the United States. I hope that they stand up to Trump. I honestly do, even though I'm an American, because I think that what Trump is doing here is going to hurt everybody.
I agree.
Yep. What she pointed out is this. You're saying you're going to hit us with, and Trump. By the way, Trump talks about how much the U.S. Buys from those countries without even like factoring in how much those countries buy from us.
Right.
Canada buys more stuff from the United States than the number 2 through 5 countries combined. They buy more from us by far than any other country on earth, including China. So we're going to start a trade war with them when we get so much of our rare earth minerals, our oil, our lumber from Canada. Same thing with Mexico. I saw yesterday 70% of the tomatoes sold in the United States come from Mexico. So we're going to start a trade. I mean, that's just one product. So
ridiculous.
What the Mexican president said is this. She said 70% of the guns that are found in the hands of criminals arrested in Mexico came from the United States. So you're complaining that drugs are coming up through Mexico into the United States and migrants. Well, number one, we don't have a big drug problem in Mexico. We don't have a lot of ODs and people dying from drugs. They just don't. They're like, she's like, your country, the demand for drugs is what causes the cartels to exist and be powerful and make money in our country. Your country, your insatiable demand for drugs is causing problems in our country, but you don't want to recognize that. That's number one. And number two, all the guns that we have in our country in the hands of the cartels are coming from you. So while you're complaining about us, you're not looking at what you're doing to us. And if you want to start a trade war, that's just going to hurt everybody.